Good day, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for our webinar today. I think you're going to find this one very interesting. It's very exciting. I can't wait to share this information with you because today we're going to be introducing Vicon's newest generation of Valerus hardware, what we call Shadow Elite. Now, whether you're using high-resolution cameras or advanced analytics or third-party integrations, all those features demand robust computing operations and reliable servers with consistent performance for continuous management of your system. And that's why we've engineered this new line of Shadow Elite servers. With best-in-class Dell and Intel components, this line delivers unparalleled performance and retention for installations of any size. They're also strategically designed for lightning-fast setup, preloaded with Valerus software and pre-configured hardware so you can get up and running in just minutes. Now, for Valerus users, these new Shadow Elite servers welcome a new era of performance, reliability, and of course, peace of mind. They ensure quick installation and provide consistent, superior performance, ultimately reducing downtime or frustrating support calls. Now, if the Shadow name rings a bell or seems a bit familiar to you, especially if you're one of our existing customers, our previous Shadow line represented our most advanced servers at that time. But we've now expanded to include a full suite of powerful options. The Shadow Elite line now features a wide variety of recording servers or NVRs, application servers, and client workstations to offer every type of server you'll need to create a powerful, reliable, and easy to manage system. So why Shadow Elite? Well, these servers are engineered to deliver power, performance, reliability, and I said it before, peace of mind. They represent the latest in enterprise surveillance hardware. With the Shadow Elite servers, we've supercharged every metric. Recorders can retain more footage and manage twice as many cameras, reducing overall hardware requirements. Clients can view more feeds with crystal clear clarity, and the latest app servers are packed with the most reliable options so you're not dealing with downtime. These servers also offer more scalability than ever before. You can support over 150 more cameras on a single NVR than our previous servers ever supported. And we've partnered with Dell and Intel, so you know the performance will last for years to come. Also, don't forget the optimizations that we've made for Valerus. We've gotten rid of the bloatware, and we pre-configure the servers and workstations with Valerus software, so you get more from your investment with less setup. Now let's talk about how easily you can install the Shadow Elite servers. They're all designed and engineered to make life simpler. At the outset, you can install in minutes because we've already heard Valerus comes preloaded. So there's no need to wait for software downloads and installations. But more than that, if it's an NVR, the storage drives will be installed and configured. And if it has a RAID array, well, that array will be configured as well. So all you have to do is just activate your license, and in under 4 clicks, you should be good to go. And as an added benefit, we've thrown in some free Valerus Pro licenses when you purchase a server or a workstation, so you can hit the ground running with either a new system or add those licenses to your existing system. The Shadow Elite line was built to last and is backed by the best support in the industry. Remember, hardware is only as good as its support. Each server includes a 5-year, next business day, on-site warranty, with keep your hard drive options if you ever need a system replacement. They're also backed by our own industry-leading US-based support team, ready to help you 24/7. Not to mention the fact that you only have a single point of contact for support. You're going to call us. We're going to work with you and determine, do we have a software issue? Do we have a hardware issue? And if it's a hardware issue, is it a server workstation issue? If it is, we're going to bring Dell support on the line, help you get authenticated, and ensure that you get that next business day support scheduled and set up for Dell to come out and fix that issue with the hardware. So no more of that frustrating back and forth between the hardware and the software vendor. We got your back the whole way. Now, when we talk about this Shadow Elite line, there are flexible configuration options in how it works with Valerus. So let's talk a little bit about the Valerus system architecture. We're going to start off with the application service. Now, the application service typically runs on an application server, unless you're running an all-in-one system. Well, what is the application service? Well, really, it's the brain of the system. It's the part of the system that has your entire system configuration and your databases and helps manage all the different parts and pieces of the system, just like your own brain manages your own body. Next, we have the NVR service, and that's usually on a recording server, or again, part of an all-in-one. But it's truly the workhorse of the system, because when you think about it, the NVR is not only recording video, it's also playing back video, and it's managing all those cameras that it is actually in charge of. So the NVR probably works harder than any other service in the system, and that's why I like to call it the workhorse. Next, we have the visualization portion of our system. And this is going to be our web client along with our Valerus player. This is where we're going to look at live video, or we're going to look at playback video, or we're going to export video, or we're going to interface with the administrative part of our web client and configure our system, or basically talk to the application server and tell it how we want the system to work. So right there, we could have an application server, we could have a recording server, and we could have a workstation, a client workstation. Certainly 3 different pieces: the brains, the workhorse, the visualization. And all of that would be connected to our network, to our cameras, so that we have a full surveillance system. Now, depending on the type of application that you have, you might be able to get away with an all-in-one type system. This would be a single server that's acting as the brain, acting as the workhorse, and also allowing you to do visualizations, allowing you to view live video, playback video, export video, and configure the system. That would be an all-in-one. The all-in-one obviously means that that machine has to be very robust because it's doing multiple jobs. But as your system grows, you might find that you need to go to separate pieces of hardware so that you can continue to expand your system, and with flexibility built into this type of architecture, as I need to add more cameras, perhaps I take my NVR server, my recording server, to its maximum capacity. Well, then I simply just start to add more recording servers, more workhorses. So in this case, I have an application server. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 recording servers, and 1 or certainly many more workstations available as well. So now that we sort of understand the different parts and pieces of a Valerus system, it's really time for us to go ahead and jump into the Shadow Elite line portfolio, and we'll do a quick overview of everything that's available in it. Now, the first form factor we're going to talk about is what we call the micro tower. This is a very small machine. And notice in parentheses, you see the letters MC for micro. I'll explain what that's about in just a little bit. This will be offered as a client workstation only as a client workstation. If we move up a little bit larger, we have what we call the small form factor or small tower. And we're going to put that in the parentheses here. You see SF, small form factor. Now, this machine will be offered for use as a client workstation. It will be offered for use as an application server, and it will also be offered as a recording server or an all-in-one. Any recording server can be an all-in-one. Now, you don't have to memorize any of this. I'm just trying to give you an overview of the hardware and what it might or might not be used for. The next thing we have is the full tower. This is a much bigger machine, and it will typically be offered to you as a recording server. And again, because it's a recording server, it could be an all-in-one. It will support both RAID 5 and RAID 6. And again, because it can be an all-in-one, well, if it's an all-in-one, then it will be a client workstation and it will be an application server if we're using it in all-in-one mode. But we're not going to necessarily offer this to you directly pre-configured, if you will, as just a client workstation or as just an application server. Hope that makes sense. Next, let's take a look at our other form factor, which would be our rack mount servers. And then we have several different flavors here as well. We have our OneU Rack mount, in parentheses OneU. That's going to be a client workstation or an app server or a recording server. And we know as a recording server, it could be an all-in-one. So that's why it could be an app server or a client workstation as well. But we'll actually offer it to you in any of those three configurations. Now we have another OneU Rack mount server that also uses the OneU designation. So this particular server has enough drive bays that we can set it up with a RAID array. Now we'll get a little bit larger. We're going to go to a 2U rack mount, and in parentheses we have 2U. And this is also a recording server with RAID, or it can be an all-in-one, but it's going to have even more drive space and potentially more RAID options. From there, we go to a 2U deep rack mount server. So this is going to be a little bit deeper in the length from front to back. It's not double the size or anything like that. It's just a little bit deeper, obviously still the same width, still 2 rack units high, but we call it the 2U deep rack. And this is also going to be a recording server with RAID or an all-in-one. And then finally we have the FiveU Rack mount. FiveU Rack mount, in parentheses FiveU. And this is a recording server with RAID. And of course, again, it could be also used as an all-in-one. Now we'll get into the specifics of these different form factors and what they can and can't do in just a little bit. I just wanted to give you an idea of the form factors of the machines that we're going to be offering. Now, along with that, you might have some questions as well about our part numbering scheme. And that's why I showed you those things in parentheses. So our part number is really simple, but like anything, something new, it takes a little while to get used to. So here's how the part number is built out. There's a set of 4 characters followed by a set of 6 characters followed by a set of 3 characters. And we break those down. So the first character is the system that this piece of hardware is going to work with. So V is going to be for Valerus. The next will be the category of the hardware, and we call this the Shadow Elite line of hardware. So we're going to use E for Elite. So far we've got a V and an E. And then what type of system is this server being used for? Is it a dedicated app server? Is it a dedicated client workstation? Or is it a recorder, an NVR? So an A, an R, or a C. And then finally, the chassis revision, which right now, this is the first iteration of Shadow Elite. So the chassis revision is the letter A. So a VEAA would be a Valerus Shadow Elite app server, first rev. A VERA would be a Valerus, Shadow Elite, NVR recorder, first rev. And a VECA would be a Valerus, Elite, client workstation, first rev. Now the next part is going to actually tell you the form factor of the equipment being used. These first two characters here under the D section, 1 and 2. And you see that we have FT, full tower. We met that just a little while ago. And then we have SF, which is that small form factor, sort of desktop small tower. We have MC for micro. We have OneU for the OneU Rack. We have 2U for the 2U Rack. We have 2D for the 2U Deep Rack. And 5U for the 5U Rack. The next three characters are going to be the terabytes of available data storage. Available storage. Now, just to say, for instance, you put in a 16 terabyte hard drive, do you get 16 terabytes of storage? Well, we're going to tell you what the actual available storage is. So like, for instance, on a typical 16 terabyte drive, you're probably going to get about 14 terabytes of available storage. And that's going to also change, of course, if you're using RAID 5 or RAID 6. So the number that you're going to see here is going to be the available or the net available storage. The last thing we have here is the type of storage. If it's non-RAID, we're just going to use the letter D, direct attached SATA drives. D for direct attached. If it's a RAID 5, we're going to use the letter F, F for 5. And if it's a RAID 6, we're going to use the letter S for 6, 5, 6. So this gives you an idea of how you can sort of decode a part number. The last three items here, they don't follow the typical logic necessarily. The first item is our camera interface type, and this is an IP camera interface. There's no analog inputs at this point. There's no built-in PoE switch or anything like that. Next, we have a placeholder. So we're just going to leave that as a 0 for right now for future use. And then we have what we call the extended configuration. This is going to be a number from 0 to 9. This is going to represent which CPU we have in the particular machine. It might be an i3. It might be an i7. It might be a Xeon. It might be a dual Xeon. And on top of that, we also are going to talk about the type of graphics card, whether it's onboard graphics, or we've added a graphics card with 2 outputs, or we've added a second graphics card with additional outputs, or an additional graphics card with additional outputs. But there's not a code that I can pass on to you for those items at this time. But you will be able to look at the description of the product code in our product code list and fully understand what's going on. But what we really want to key in on here is what type of system is it, app server, recorder, or client workstation, and what form factor is it, how much storage it has, what type of storage it has, and then we can worry about which CPU and which graphics card we actually need for our application. Again, don't feel like you need to memorize this. This is something that as you work with this more, you'll start to understand how it works. All right, let's start off with our standard recording servers. When I say standard, I mean our recording servers that don't have RAID storage. So our non-RAID configurations. Now this is available in a small tower here or the OneU Rack. And we can quickly see the differences between the two. In the small tower, our maximum storage, 16 terabytes. The maximum number of cameras that we can handle, 100 cameras, or 200 megabits per second of throughput, whichever comes first. Very, very simple. Next, we look at the OneU Rack, 32 terabytes of storage. 100 cameras or 200 megabits per second, whichever comes first. So what's the real difference between these two? Well, the difference would be double the storage in the rack version, right? That would be That would be one of the differences, but there are some other differences as well, and we'll get to those in just a moment. Now, this can be used as a standalone NVR or as an all-in-one machine. Right? So we're talking about this as a recording server, but I remind you again that all recording servers could be used as an all-in-one machine. So it can run the application server service, and we can certainly run the web client and Valerus player on it to use it as a client workstation. The whole idea of this is to reduce overall hardware cost and footprint, and we know that there is currently a maximum of 100 cameras or 200 megabits per second of throughput. And we have variable CPUs, RAM, storage, and display options per model. So let's take just a quick look at this, starting with this chart right here. We see the small form factor, that's the SF for the small tower right here. It comes in an i3 processor, but it also comes in an i7 processor. Now everybody says, oh, I got to get the i7 because it's better than the i3. I just want to point out some specifications to you. The i3 will do 100 IP cameras up to 200 megabits per second, and the i7 will do 100 IP cameras at 200 megabits per second. They both have dual 4K monitor outputs using onboard graphics, dual 4K monitors using onboard graphics. One is using a 10th generation i3, the other is using a 10th generation i7. One has 8 gigs of RAM, and the other has 16 gigs of RAM. So what really would be the difference between these two? And that difference is going to come if I'm using it as an all-in-one on the number of cameras that I can easily display without any lag. In the datasheet, you'll see a chart that will explain to you how many cameras you can expect to be able to display without any lag. And basically, the i7 will process or decode about twice as many cameras. They both support dual 4K monitors using the onboard graphics card. Now, of course, you could certainly connect two 1080p monitors as well. But the difference between these two systems is going to be in the video that they can process if they're being used as a client workstation. Very, very simple. The i7 will have a higher cost, but it will provide more decoding to the monitor. Now, the OneU Rack, we have an i3 version and we have a Xeon version. In this case, they're both supporting 100 IP cameras at 200 megabits per second, so there's no difference there. They have quad 4K monitor capability using an NVIDIA Quadro graphics card, and we have the same thing on the Xeon version. We have the Intel Xeon processor with 16 gigs of RAM versus an Intel 9th generation i3 processor with 8 gigs of RAM. So what's going to be the difference between these two? Again, is going to be the number of cameras that can be decoded and displayed on the up to 4 4K monitors. When does that become an issue? It becomes an issue if you're using this as a client workstation versus just as a recording server. Remember, the small tower and the OneU Rack are non-RAID, and we're limited to 16 terabytes of storage in the small tower and up to 32 terabytes of storage in the OneU Rack. Now let's step it up a little bit. Let's go to our RAID recording servers. There's quite a few of them. So we're going to start off with the OneU Rack, which is a compact rack unit, high performance, high reliability for operations requiring, well, we'll say less storage, but still good, powerful video retention. This will support up to 64 terabytes with 200 cameras or 500 megabits per second of throughput. So we already see a pretty good change in performance, virtually double. Then we can go to our 2U Deep Rack. Now remember, this unit takes up the same number of rack units, but it's deeper. It goes into the rack deeper than a standard 2U rack we see over here to the right. So the 2U deep rack will have 384 terabytes maximum storage. It has 250 camera max capability and a data rate of up to 800 megabits, where when we look at the 2U rack, it's 192 terabytes, 200 cameras, 600 megabits. So from the 1U rack to the 2U rack to the 2U deep rack, we do see some changes in performance. And these all support RAID 5 or RAID 6 depending on the configuration. These RAID recording servers provide best-in-class components and features. They support both RAID 5 and RAID 6, and redundant power supplies are standard in all three of these models. And they all come with the integrated Dell Remote Access Controller, or iDRAC. iDRAC allows for quick and secure remote management so that an IT professional can manage the system from anywhere. Now, that's not the end of our models for RAID recording servers. We also have, are you ready for this, a FiveU Rack. So this is really for large-scale applications that need extra power and storage. You get more storage with a smaller footprint than multiple machines. Our maximum storage here, 1,600 terabytes or 1.6 petabytes. Maximum though of 250 cameras with a max data rate of 800 megabits per second. So notice the number of cameras didn't climb exponentially, but the amount of storage, the amount of retention that you could have certainly got larger with a more compact footprint. And then we have not a rack version, but what we call the full tower. The full tower, as we know, is available as an all-in-one for large storage and high camera count, or it can be used just as a RAID recording server. It has 192 terabyte maximum storage capacity, maximum of 200 cameras, and a maximum of 600 megabits per second data rate. So again, whichever comes first. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these product descriptions versus the part numbers so that we can sort of understand these different form factors and different configurations. Now, obviously, I can't show you every configuration because with smaller drives, medium-sized drives, largest drives, there are so many different possibilities. So I'm going to typically key in on the largest of each of these options. So we're going to start with the OneU Rack mount form factor, which we know has a Xeon processor in it. So let's look at the part number here. VERA, Vicon, Elite Recorder, Chassis Revision A. Dash 1U, that's our form factor, 1U form factor. Then we have 43T, 43 terabytes. F for RAID 5. Now the N02, this is where we're going to have to read the description to see which CPU and which graphics card we're getting with this. We already know it's a Xeon. So this is a recording server with a RAID, 200 IP cameras, 500 megabits per second. But let's look at what's highlighted. This supports one WUXGA. That's 1920 by 1200. So it's a little bit bigger than 1920 by 1080. It supports one of those monitors using the onboard graphics card. So there's the first thing, it's using onboard graphics. Because let's face it, a rack-mounted recorder isn't typically what you're going to connect a monitor and a keyboard to for viewing video. It's not typically used as a workstation. It comes with 64 terabytes of gross storage, which gives us a net of 43.2 terabytes. So we use 43T here to identify 43 terabytes. It is RAID 5. Okay? It's got 16 gigs of RAM, and it's got the iDRAC built in. Next thing we have is a 2U rack mount form factor, again with the Xeon processor. So if we go back to the part number, Victor, Echo, Romeo, Alpha. So we know it's a recorder, 2U form factor, 144S, 144 terabytes, RAID 6. S is for 6. So let's read it. 200 cameras, 600 megabits, one monitor using onboard graphics, 144 terabyte usable of 192 terabyte gross storage. And that's RAID 6, which means we have 2 drives being used for parity. It has 16 gigs of RAM, it's got iDRAC, and of course it has the dual redundant power supplies. Continuing on a little bit larger now, we have the 2U deep rack. And when we look at this part number, Victor, Echo, Romeo, Alpha, so we know it's a recorder. And then it's a -2D for 2 deep. And this has 316S for storage. That sounds like 316 terabytes of RAID 6. So let's see here, 384 terabytes gross, with 316.8 terabytes usable with RAID 6. It's got 16 gigs of RAM, it's got iDRAC, it's got one WXGA monitor output, and of course it has the dual redundant power supplies. So you can start to see now it's fairly easy to decode the part number. The only part that we have to read about is we have to choose, again, the processor, the type of graphics card that you want to have. Let's go on to some of our largest options. So here we have our FiveU rack mount form factor. Now I highlighted a bunch of different things here in different colors because I wanted to point out some of the features that are a little bit different about this one. So we have VERA, so we know that this is a Vicon Elite recorder. FiveU form factor, and here we have a 1P3S. Now the letter P stands for petabytes, which is the next size up from terabytes. So what we actually have here in our largest system is a 1600 terabyte gross storage with 1,324 terabytes of usable storage. Now we're always going to give you the usable, so that would be 1324 terabyte would be 1 peta 3, 1.3 petabytes. When we put that letter in the middle, it's like a decimal point and telling us what range we're using. So 1P3 is 1.3 petabytes. And what else is different about this? It's still one WXGA monitor using onboard graphics, but it has Intel dual Xeon processor. It has 32 gigs of RAM, and it has quad network ports, and it also has iDRAC built in and dual redundant power supplies. This thing is a beast, for sure. And last but not least, we have the full tower. The full tower form factor. This is not rack mount. This is a full-size tower machine. So we have the VERA-FT full tower, and this is a 100F. 100, 100 terabytes, RAID 5, F for 5. So let's just check it out here. We have, again, one WXGA monitor using onboard graphics. We have the Intel Xeon processor, 16 gigs of RAM. We have dual gigabit network ports. We have dual redundant power supplies. We have the iDRAC built in. Now there is also an available option here to go to the Windows Server operating system on this particular machine. And by the way, that's one of the other things that changes between these machines is the potential to have Windows Server on certain of these rack mount machines. As you can see in the FiveU model, the FiveU, we are using Windows Server. The full tower doesn't come with Windows Server, but you can have that as an option. So that's a look at just one model of each of the different form factors. Now you can certainly tell that the RAID recording servers have the most models, and because you have the most models, you have the most different configurations, especially when it comes to storage, storage type, RAID 5, RAID 6, etc. Even some choices on the OS in certain models. But our RAID servers all feature high-end components for the toughest enterprise installations. You're safeguarded against downtime with dual redundant power supplies, and they all include Dell's iDRAC, a quick, secure remote management platform, so IT administrators can deploy, update, and monitor servers anywhere at any time. To help you realize the difference in drive size capabilities, the number of drive bays varies between the units. The OneU has 4 drive bays. The 2U has 12 bays. The 2U Deep has 24 bays. The 5U has 100 bays. And the full tower has 8 bays. So to put those in ascending order, 1U, 4 bays, full tower, 8 bays, 2U, 12 bays, 2 Deep, 24 bays, and the 5U, 100 bays. Now let's move on to our application servers. The application servers are our most reliable application servers yet, with 3 different CPU options. The rack mount version includes dual redundant power supplies to safeguard against a power supply failure. And what we're going to do now is just go ahead and take a look at the small tower versus the OneU Rack and the different options. So obviously the small tower gives us that powerful and convenient app server with a straightforward setup, and the rack mount version for operations that are utilizing server racks, pretty straightforward. The major differences between the different offerings are in the small form factor. We have the i3 processor version and an i7 processor. So if we look at these 2 part numbers here, Valerus, Elite, Application Server, Rev, and then small form factor or small tower, no storage, because as an application server, you're not recording video. There's no need to have storage in there, although you can have it configured with storage if you want to. But the basic configuration is going to be with no storage. But in any case, the app server in the small form factor, it supports dual 4K monitors using an onboard graphics card. Small form factor, we know that. We have a 10th generation i3 processor with 8 gigs of RAM, and we're going to use Windows 10 Enterprise. And it has a single power supply in the small tower. The i7 version is identical, except that it's an i7 processor and it has double the RAM. So what does this really mean at the end of the day? What's really the difference between the two? Well, some people like to future-proof. They want that i7 processor over an i3 processor, willing to pay a little bit more for it. If you happen to be using this to display video, once again, you'll be able to display more video with the i7 version over the i3 version. That's really it. That's the difference between the two. Then we have the OneU Rack mount version, and here we're going to have a Xeon processor. It will support quad WUXGA monitors, so 4 of the 1920 by 1200 video size. You'll probably just use 1920 by 1080. It is an Intel Xeon processor. It has 16 gigs of RAM, Windows 10 Enterprise, but it does have dual redundant power supplies and dual gigabit network ports. And all 3 of these models, they all include 4 Valerus Pro licenses. Next thing we're going to talk about is the client workstations. Now the client workstations come in 3 different offerings. We have the micro tower, we have the small tower, and we have the OneU Rack. Let's just take a quick look at the basic specs. The micro tower, the client that's best suited for everyday monitoring with a micro form factor, will support up to 2 monitors, and it could have up to 2 terabytes of storage in it. The small tower will support up to 4 monitors with 16 terabytes of storage. It's a little higher performance for more complex workflows, and it has a little additional storage to it. And then finally, the OneU Rack. This is our powerful rack mounted for those applications where you want your hardware in a rack, and this could also be used to drive something like a video wall. It supports a maximum of 4 monitors and 16 terabytes of storage. Now, the whole purpose of this line was to provide users with the power, the flexibility, and the scalability needed to manage small, all the way up to large-scale operations with reliable monitoring. The micro is very efficient for smaller jobs, and it saves space. The small tower, as we said, it's a little higher performance, and the rack unit is ready for applications using a high level of performance and energy in need of efficiency and reliability. Reliability because we're going to have the dual redundant power supplies. So we don't want to miss a thing with high performance, crystal clear video. We want to support up to 4 monitors depending on the form factor. And finally, local storage for downloading video exports. So 2 terabytes up to 16 terabytes in the OneU and in the small tower. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the part numbers and specifications associated with the Shadow Elite client workstation. So we're going to start at the top. We have the VECA. So this is Valerus Elite Client Workstation Rev A. And this is followed by an MC, which is our micro form factor. No storage configured at this point. And this is my i3 processor. And the same thing from going from N00 to N01 is my i7 processor. So the micro comes in an i3 and an i7, and they both support dual 4K monitors. They both have 10th generation processors, i3 and i7, 8 gigs of RAM versus 16 gigs of RAM. You're starting to see the pattern here, I hope, as to how the difference in the processors and the RAM, etc. work. And still come with the same warranty, 5-year, next business day, on site, keep your hard drive, all that good stuff. Next step up would be the small form factor. It's available in an i3 and an i7. Still supports dual 4K monitors, right, using onboard graphics. And we have 8 gigs of RAM versus 16 gigs of RAM. However, in the i7 version, there is another model. Notice the change in the part number. We go to the N04, and this supports quad 4K monitors using an NVIDIA Quadro graphics card. So that's the change that actually happens there, is we add that non-onboard graphics card so that we can have more monitors supported. Still the same 10th generation i7 processor, still 16 gigs of RAM, same Windows, everything the same. We just added the graphics card. And when we go to the OneU Rack mount form factor, we come with an i7 processor only. It has quad 4K monitors using an NVIDIA Quadro card. It is using a different processor. It's the 9th generation i7 processor with 16 gigs of RAM and dual 550 watt redundant power supplies. So this is what we add in here, is the redundant power supply. And the Quadro card, virtually the same processor, just 1 generation earlier, which is what we find in the rack mount version. So we have, again, micro, we have small form factor, both i3 and i7, i3 and i7, and then the i7 with an extra graphics card, and finally the OneU rack mount version, which comes with a graphics card and dual redundant power supplies. The whole idea behind a server line like this, working hand in hand with Valerus, is so that it can be used in extensive applications. Options for small to large applications, whether it be in a retail environment, whether it be at a shipping port, small and large airports, construction sites, safe city type applications. or healthcare centers. It really doesn't matter. What you've got now is a hardware portfolio where you can choose and mix and match the form factor, the processing power, the storage, everything that you need so that you can optimize the system for what the customer currently needs, or you can prepare the system for growth in the future as the customer's needs grow. So let's do a quick review here. Our Shadow Elite system is going to provide us with super high performance. It comes pre-configured for easy installation, not just software pre-installed, but also our storage array and storage drives pre-installed, pre-configured. We have flexible form factors and different specifications within them to specifically meet the customer's needs. Best in class 5-year next business day on-site warranty for the hardware, and keep your hard drive as well if you have to do a full system type swap out. And at the end of the day, this is really the next step in the evolution of Valerus, because when you take that software and you put it on high performance hardware, well, certainly it's just going to perform that much better. Now, we're a little bit past our time, and there are actually quite a few questions in the queue, but as I glance through them, they're more specific to certain applications and so forth. So as we always do, I will take those questions, I will go through and I will answer every one of them. And in our follow-up email, we'll provide you a list of all the questions that were asked and all the answers, and hopefully any question that you might have will fall into that category. If not, you can go ahead and reach out to us at sales@vicon-security.com. You can ask your question there as well. I really thank you for your time and attention. I know this wasn't the easiest thing to follow because it's pretty technical, but I want to point out one last thing to you. The official launch for this server line is today. Today's the official launch. You should be receiving some e-blasts with some links to different documentation and so forth. Website should be updated at some point today with all of this new hardware, as well as data sheets, quick start guides, all that information that you're going to be looking for. Please feel free to reach out to your local regional sales manager for any assistance that you might have. Probably one of the biggest questions I think I really should answer this time was about lead times. So there are certain models that we're going to call our models that we're going to keep in stock. Those will typically have about a 1 to 2 week lead time. And then there are the special configurations, and those will have anywhere from a 2 to 4 week lead time. That's our goal. We'll see with, as things change in the shipping issues that are happening in the world right now, we hope we can speed that up. We're going to get it to you just as quickly as we can. We don't want to make you wait. We certainly want to put any product in your hands as quickly as we can. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone once again for your time and your attention, and I really appreciate you joining us here. We do have another webinar coming up in about 2 weeks that's going to cover forensic searches and how to make them a little bit easier. So once again, thanks for attending, and if you're not watching this live, you're watching this on our YouTube channel, go ahead and click on subscribe, and don't forget to click on the alarm bell, and that'll make sure that you're informed of all new videos posted to our YouTube channel. Once again, thank you and have a great day.